Picture this. It's a quiet Tuesday evening in suburban Denver, Colorado. 24-year-old Vivian Martinez is preparing dinner in her kitchen, humming softly to herself, the same song she danced to at her wedding just 13 months ago. The smell of garlic and herbs fills the air, creating the kind of warmth that makes a house feel like home. She glances at the clock, 6:47 p.m. Her husband Michael will be home soon from his job at the insurance firm. But tonight will shatter everything she thought she knew about safety, about family, about trust. Tonight, the man who walked her down the aisle when her own father couldn't, the man she called Papa Frank, the man who had been like a father to her for the past 3 years, would destroy her world in ways she never imagined possible. What happens when the person who's supposed to protect you becomes the person you need protection from? What happens when your safe haven becomes your prison? And what happens when speaking your truth and means risking everything you've built? This is Vivian's story. A story of betrayal, courage, and the fight for justice that would test every relationship she held dear. But more than that, it's a story that could save someone's life. Maybe even yours. Before we start, let us know where you're watching from so we can see how far this message travels. And if you're new here, subscribe for more real stories that raise awareness and help protect others. To understand the depth of what happened to Vivian, you need to know how it all began. 3 years earlier, in the spring of 2021, Vivian was a 21-year-old nursing student at the University of Colorado. She was working part-time at a local coffee shop when she met Michael Rodriguez, a charming 25-year-old with kind eyes and a laugh that could fill a room. Their first date was at a small Italian restaurant downtown. Nothing fancy, but Michael insisted on walking her to her car afterward, making sure she got home safely. That simple gesture, that basic act of caring, meant the world to Vivian. You see, Vivian had grown up in foster care after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12. She had learned early on that the only person she could truly rely on was herself. But Michael was different. He was patient with her walls, gentle with her fears, and consistent in ways that helped her believe in love again. 6 months into their relationship, Michael brought her home to meet his family. The Rodriguez house was everything Vivian had dreamed of as a child. Warm, loud, filled with the kind of chaos that comes from genuine love. There was Maria, Michael's mother, who immediately pulled Vivian into a hug that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon. There was Carlos, Michael's younger brother, who teased her mercilessly, but always with a grin. And then there was Frank, Michael's father. Frank Rodriguez was 52 years old, a successful contractor who had built the family business from nothing. He was the kind of man who commanded respect without demanding it. Tall, broad-shouldered, with calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work. When he smiled at Vivian that first evening, extending his hand and saying, "Welcome to the family, Mija," she felt something she hadn't felt in almost a decade. She felt like she belonged. Over the next 2 years, Frank became the father figure Vivian had been missing. He taught her how to change her car's oil, helped her study for her nursing boards, and walked her through the intimidating process of buying her first car. When she graduated nursing school, Frank was there in the front row cheering louder than anyone. When she and Michael got engaged, Frank was the one who pulled her aside afterward and said, "I've never seen my son happier. Thank you for loving him the way you do." The wedding in June 2023 was small but perfect. Since Vivian had no family of her own, Frank stepped in to walk her down the aisle. As they made their way toward Michael, Frank whispered, "Your parents would be so proud of the woman you've become." Vivian had to fight back tears, not just from his words, but from the overwhelming gratitude she felt for this man who had chosen to love her like his own daughter. The early months of marriage were everything Vivian had hoped for. She and Michael rented a small house just 15 minutes from his parents, close enough for Sunday dinners but far enough for their own space. Frank would often stop by during his lunch breaks, sometimes bringing materials to fix something around the house, sometimes just to check in. "How's my favourite daughter-in-law doing?" he would ask, and Vivian would laugh and remind him she was his only daughter-in-law. But looking back, there were signs. Small things that seemed innocent at the time but took on new meaning later. Frank's hugs lasted just a little too long. His compliments about her appearance were just a little too detailed. His questions about her work schedule, her routines, her time alone. They seemed caring then, but they were something else entirely. As 2023 turned into 2024, Frank's behaviour began to change in ways that made Vivian uncomfortable, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. During family gatherings, he would make comments about her appearance that left her feeling exposed. "That dress looks amazing on you, Vivian," he would say, his eyes lingering just a moment too long. "Michael's a lucky man." The words themselves weren't inappropriate, but something about the way he said them, the way he looked at her when he said them, made her skin crawl. Maria never seemed to notice, too busy bustling around the kitchen or managing the chaos of family dinner. Michael, sweet and trusting Michael, would just grin and say, "Thanks, Dad, I know I am." But Vivian started choosing her outfits more carefully when she knew she'd be seeing Frank, opting for loose-fitting clothes that revealed nothing. The text messages started around Christmas 2023. At first, they seemed innocent. "Hope you have a great day at work," or "saw this recipe and thought of you." But gradually, they became more personal, more frequent. Frank would text her about how proud he was of her, how special she was, how much she meant to the family. He would ask about her shifts at the hospital, when she worked late, when Michael was travelling for work. Vivian tried to convince herself she was overreacting. This was Frank, the man who had walked her down the aisle, who had welcomed her into his family with open arms. Maybe he was just being fatherly. Maybe she was misinterpreting his kindness because of her own difficult past with trust. But then came the day in January 2024 when Frank stopped by the house while Michael was at work. Vivian was home with the flu, and Frank said Maria had sent soup. He lingered in the kitchen, asking about her symptoms, insisting on feeling her forehead for fever. His touch made her recoil instinctively, but she forced herself to smile and thank him for caring. "You know," Frank said, settling into a chair at their kitchen table as if he belonged there, "you can talk to me about anything, Vivian. Anything at all. I know what it's like to feel alone, to not have anyone to turn to." His voice was soft, almost hypnotic, and for a moment Vivian felt the pull of his offer. Part of her did feel alone sometimes, especially when Michael was working late or travelling. Part of her did miss having a father figure to confide in, but something deeper, some instinct born from years of protecting herself, told her to be careful. "I appreciate that, Frank," she said, standing and moving toward the front door in a clear signal that the visit was over. "But I'm really not feeling well. I should rest." Frank's expression flickered, just for a second, with something that looked almost like anger. But then his warm smile returned, and he stood to leave. "Of course, Mija. Get some rest. I'll check on you later." That phrase, "I'll check on you later," echoed in Vivian's mind long after Frank left. It sounded less like a promise and more like a threat. The incidents escalated through February and March. Frank would find excuses to touch her, a hand on her shoulder that lingered too long, a hug that pressed too close, fingers that brushed against hers when passing dishes at dinner. He began showing up at the house more frequently when Michael wasn't home, always with some plausible excuse. He was in the neighbourhood. He'd forgotten something. He wanted to check on a repair he had made months ago. Vivian started feeling anxious in her own home, constantly checking the locks, keeping her phone close, making sure she was never caught off guard. She stopped answering the door when she was alone, stopped responding to Frank's text messages as quickly as she used to. But she didn't tell Michael. How could she? How do you tell your husband that his father, the man who raised him, the man who walked you down the aisle, might be crossing boundaries in ways that made you feel unsafe? Besides, What if she was wrong? What if Frank really was just being fatherly, and she was the one with the problem? What if speaking up would destroy the family she had finally found, the family she had always dreamed of having? What if Michael didn't believe her? What if he chose his father over her? These questions tormented Vivian through the spring of 2024, creating a constant undercurrent of anxiety in what should have been the happiest time of her life. She was building her career as a nurse. She had a husband who adored her. She had finally found the family she had always wanted. So why did she feel like she was walking on eggshells? Why did she dread family gatherings? Why did the sound of Frank's voice make her heart race with fear instead of warmth? The answer to those questions would come on a humid evening in late May 2024, just 3 days before her and Michael's first wedding anniversary. It would come in the form of a betrayal so profound, so violating, that it would change everything she thought she knew about family, about trust, about her own worth and strength. May 28th, 2024. A date that will forever be etched in Vivian's memory, not because it was close to her first anniversary, but because it was the night her world collapsed. Michael had left that morning for a 3-day business conference in Phoenix, kissing Vivian goodbye and promising to call her every evening. The house felt unusually quiet without him, but Vivian had plans. She was going to deep clean their home, prepare a special dinner for when he returned, and maybe catch up on some reading. She had worked the night shift at the hospital and arrived home around 8 a.m., exhausted but satisfied after helping deliver a healthy baby during her shift. There's something magical about bringing new life into the world, and despite her fatigue, Vivian felt peaceful as she made herself some coffee and settled into the quiet morning routine she had come to love. Around 10 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from Frank. Heard Michael made it to Phoenix safely. How are you doing, Mija? She stared at the message for a long moment before responding simply, I'm fine, thanks. But something about the timing bothered her. How did Frank know exactly when Michael had left? She hadn't mentioned the conference to him, and she was fairly certain Michael hadn't either. Vivian spent the day cleaning, doing laundry, and trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in her stomach. By evening, she was exhausted from both her night shift and the day of housework. She took a long, hot shower, put on her most comfortable pajamas, soft cotton shorts and an oversized t-shirt, and settled into bed with a book around 9 p.m. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, she was awakening to a sound that didn't belong. It was soft, careful, the sound of someone moving through her house who was trying not to be heard. Vivian's heart immediately began racing. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand. 11:47 p.m. She listened intently, hoping she had imagined it, hoping it was just the old house settling, or maybe a neighbour's cat outside. But then she heard it again. Footsteps. Definitely footsteps. Someone was in her house. Vivian's mind raced through possibilities. Michael wasn't supposed to be back until Friday. She knew she had locked all the doors before bed. She had developed that habit over the past few months, though she had never fully acknowledged why. Her hands shook as she opened her phone to call 911, but then she heard a voice that made her blood run cold. Vivian? Mija? Are you awake? It was Frank. Frank was in her house. Frank was in her house at nearly midnight while her husband was out of town. Vivian's bedroom door was closed but not locked. Why would she lock it in her own home? She heard Frank's footsteps getting closer, moving down the hallway toward her bedroom. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but where could she go? The bedroom window was too high, and Frank was between her and the front door. Frank? She called out, trying to keep her voice steady. Is everything okay? Is Maria all right? Everyone's fine, Mija. Frank's voice came through the door, closer now. I just wanted to check on you. Make sure you were safe with Michael out of town. The door handle turned. The door opened, and Frank stepped into her bedroom. Vivian pulled her blanket up to her chest, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Frank, you scared me. How did you get in? Frank smiled, the same warm smile he had given her hundreds of times before, but now it looked different, predatory. I still have the spare key from when I helped Michael move in. I saw your car in the driveway and wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm fine, Vivian said quickly, scooting back against her headboard. You can see I'm fine. You should go now. Michael will call soon for his goodnight check-in. But Frank didn't leave. Instead, he moved closer to the bed, his eyes roaming over her in a way that made her feel naked despite being covered. You look scared, Miha. You don't need to be scared of me. I would never hurt you. I'm not scared, Vivian lied. I'm just tired. Please, Frank. I need you to leave. What happened next would haunt Vivian for months afterward. Frank's expression changed, becoming harder, more determined. I'm not leaving, Vivian. Do you know how long I've waited for this? How long I've watched you, wanted you? You're so beautiful, so perfect. And you're all alone. No, Vivian whispered, clutching her phone. Frank, no, please don't do this. But Frank was no longer the gentle father figure who had walked her down the aisle. The mask had slipped completely, revealing someone Vivian didn't recognize, someone dangerous. Don't fight this, Miha. I know you feel it too. The connection between us. I've seen the way you look at me. That's not true, Vivian said, her voice stronger now. You're married to Maria. You're Michael's father. This is wrong. Frank's face darkened. Maria doesn't understand me the way you do, and what Michael doesn't know won't hurt him. What followed was a violation so profound that even now, years later, Vivian struggles to put it into words. Despite her clear and repeated no, despite her tears, despite her attempts to push him away, Frank forced himself on her. In her own bedroom, in her own bed, the man she had trusted above all others destroyed her sense of safety forever. When it was over, Frank stood and adjusted his clothes as if nothing had happened. He looked down at Vivian, who was curled in a ball, shaking and crying, and his voice was almost gentle again. This stays between us, Miha. You know what would happen to this family if Maria found out. You know what it would do to Michael. You wouldn't want to destroy everything, would you? And then he left, walking out of her bedroom, out of her house, and back to his own life as if he hadn't just shattered hers completely. The hours that followed were a blur of horror and confusion that Vivian would later struggle to piece together. She sat in her shower for what felt like hours, the hot water running until it turned cold, then sitting in the cold water until she couldn't feel anything at all. She scrubbed at her skin until it was raw, but she couldn't wash away what had happened, couldn't cleanse herself of the feeling of Frank's hands on her body. When Michael called at 1 a.m. for his usual goodnight check-in, Vivian almost didn't answer. How could she talk to him? How could she pretend everything was normal? But she knew that not answering would raise questions she wasn't ready to face. Hey, beautiful. Michael's voice came through the phone, warm and loving and completely oblivious to the fact that his wife's world had just been destroyed by his own father. Sorry I'm calling so late. The conference dinner ran long and I wanted to make sure I caught you before you fell asleep. Vivian pressed her hand over her mouth to muffle a sob before managing to speak. It's okay. How's Phoenix? Hot and boring without you, Michael laughed. I miss you already. Are you feeling all right? You sound tired. I am tired, Vivian whispered, and it was the truth. She was tired in ways she had never imagined possible. Tired of being afraid, tired of feeling dirty, tired of the questions that were already starting to torment her mind. They talked for another 10 minutes, Michael sharing stories from his conference, while Vivian made appropriate sounds of interest and engagement. When he finally said goodnight and told her he loved her, Vivian had to bite her lip to keep from screaming. The next few weeks were a nightmare of silence and internal struggle. Vivian couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate at work. Her colleagues began to notice. Dr. Martinez, the attending physician she worked with most closely, pulled her aside and asked if she was feeling well. Her supervisor mentioned that she seemed distracted during patient care. But how could she explain what was wrong? How could she tell anyone what Frank had done? The questions tortured her day and night. Should she tell Michael? How could she? Frank was his father, his hero, the man who had built the family business and provided for them all. Would Michael even believe her? And if he did believe her, what then? Would it destroy his relationship with his father? Would it tear apart the Rodriguez family that had welcomed her so completely? What about Maria? Sweet, loving Maria who had treated Vivian like the daughter she never had. Finding out about Frank's betrayal would devastate her. And what about Carlos, Michael's younger brother? He was only 19, still dependent on his parents. If this came out, if Frank was arrested, what would happen to their family business, their home, their entire way of life? Then there were the darker questions, the ones that made Vivian hate herself even as she couldn't stop thinking them. Had she somehow encouraged Frank's behaviour? Had her gratitude for his fatherly attention been misinterpreted? Had wearing that dress to Easter dinner, the one he had complimented, somehow sent the wrong signal? Had she been too friendly, too trusting, too naive? Frank, meanwhile, acted as if nothing had happened. He continued to text Vivian regularly, though his messages now carried an undertone of threat masked as concern. "Hope you're doing well, Mija. Remember what we talked about. Looking forward to seeing you at Sunday dinner. I know you'll make the right choices. You seem quiet lately. I hope you're not letting stress get to you." Sunday dinners at the Rodriguez house became exercises in torture for Vivian. She had to sit across from Frank, had to watch him laugh and joke with his family, had to endure his casual touches and meaningful looks while pretending everything was normal. Maria would fuss over her, worried about her weight loss and pale complexion. Michael would hold her hand and whisper that he was concerned about her, and Frank would watch it all with a satisfied smile, knowing that his threats were working. "You've been so quiet lately," Maria said one Sunday in early June, stroking Vivian's hair as they sat on the couch after dinner. "Are you feeling all right, Mija? You know you can talk to me about anything." The irony wasn't lost on Vivian. Here was this woman offering her the motherly support she had always craved, and she couldn't accept it because doing so would destroy Maria's entire world. "I'm fine, Maria," Vivian managed, "just tired from work." But she wasn't fine. She was drowning in silence, suffocating under the weight of a secret that was eating her alive from the inside. She had nightmares every night, always the same. Frank in her bedroom, his voice in her ear, the feeling of helplessness and violation. She started sleeping with her bedroom door locked, even when Michael was home, claiming she had developed a habit of it for security reasons. Michael knew something was wrong, but his guesses were wide of the mark. "Is it work stress?" he asked one evening, pulling her close on their couch. "Do you want to talk about it? Maybe you're working too many night shifts." Another time. "Are you having second thoughts about us? About marriage? You know you can tell me anything, right?" The concern in his voice broke Vivian's heart. She wanted so desperately to tell him, to share this burden, to have someone believe her and protect her. But every time she opened her mouth to speak, she heard Frank's voice. "You know what would happen to this family if Maria found out. You know what it would do to Michael." And so she stayed silent, carrying the weight of Frank's crime while he moved freely through their lives, continuing to play the role of loving father and grandfather to the children Carlos's girlfriend brought around, continuing to be the respected businessman and family man that everyone in their community admired. But secrets have a way of eating at you from the inside, and Vivian was beginning to realize that her silence was slowly killing her. She was losing herself, losing her spirit, losing her ability to connect with the people she loved most. Something had to change. She just didn't know what, or how, or if she would have the courage to take that first step toward reclaiming her life. The turning point came on a sweltering Thursday afternoon in late June. Vivian was sitting in the hospital break room during her lunch break, staring at an untouched sandwich, while the conversation of her colleagues washed over her like white noise. She had lost nearly 15 pounds since the assault, her scrubs hanging loosely on her frame, and she couldn't remember the last time she had slept more than 3 hours consecutively. That's when Sarah Chen, a nurse practitioner who had been working at the hospital for over a decade, sat down beside her. Sarah was known for her directness, her compassion, and her ability to spot when someone was struggling. She had been watching Vivian for weeks, noting the changes in her behaviour, her appearance, her interaction with patients and staff. "Vivian," Sarah said quietly, her voice cutting through the fog that had become Vivian's constant companion. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to know that whatever your answer is, I'm here to help." Vivian looked up, startled by the serious tone in Sarah's voice. "What do you mean?" Sarah leaned closer, her voice dropping to just above a whisper. "Has someone hurt you? Because everything about your behaviour over the past month, the weight loss, the anxiety, the way you flinch when men get too close. I've seen it before, honey, and if someone has hurt you, you don't have to carry that alone." The question hit Vivian like a physical blow. For weeks, she had been so focused on protecting Michael's family that she hadn't considered that her pain might be visible to others, that someone might notice and care enough to ask directly. Tears began streaming down her face before she could stop them. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't talk about it." Sarah moved her chair closer, creating a barrier between Vivian and the rest of the break room. "Yes, you can. And you should. Because whatever happened to you, it wasn't your fault, and you deserve support." For the first time in weeks, Vivian felt like someone was seeing her, really seeing her, instead of looking through the facade she had been desperately trying to maintain. "It's complicated," she managed through her tears. "It always is," Sarah said gently. "But complicated doesn't mean impossible, and it doesn't mean you have to suffer in silence." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small card. "This is the number for the Regional Crisis Hotline. They have trained counsellors available 24 hours a day, and everything you tell them is confidential. You don't have to give them your name. You can just talk." Vivian stared at the card as if it were a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. What if talking makes everything worse? What if not talking kills you slowly from the inside? Sarah countered. "Because that's what I'm watching happen right now, and I care about you too much to let it continue without saying something." That evening, Vivian sat in her car in the hospital parking lot for over an hour, holding Sarah's card in her trembling hands. Michael was working late, finishing up projects before they took a long weekend to celebrate their anniversary. The house would be empty, quiet, safe for a phone call that might change everything. Finally, at 9:17 p.m, she dialed the number. "Crisis support line, this is Jennifer," came a calm, professional voice. "How can I help you tonight?" The words stuck in Vivian's throat for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, I think I was sexually assaulted by someone I trusted, and I don't know what to do." "I'm so sorry that happened to you," Jennifer said, her voice warm with compassion. "Thank you for having the courage to call. You don't have to figure this out alone. Can you tell me a little bit about your situation? Are you currently safe?" For the next hour, Vivian told her story to a stranger in ways she hadn't been able to tell it to herself. She talked about Frank, about the progression of his behaviour, about the night he assaulted her. She talked about her fears for Michael's family, her guilt and confusion, her desperate need to protect everyone except herself. Jennifer listened without judgment, asking clarifying questions when necessary, offering validation and support throughout. "What Frank did to you was criminal assault," she said finally. "It doesn't matter that he's your father-in-law. It doesn't matter that you've trusted him in the past. He violated your consent and committed a serious crime." "But what about Michael's family?" Vivian asked. "What about Maria and Carlos? If I report this, it will destroy them." "Vivian," Jennifer said gently, "Frank made the choice to assault you. Frank made the choice to betray his family's trust. The consequences of his actions are his responsibility, not yours. You are not responsible for protecting your attacker or managing the fallout from his choices." Those words hit Vivian like a revelation. For weeks she had been carrying not only the trauma of Frank's assault, but also the weight of protecting him and his family from the consequences of his actions. She had been shouldering responsibility that was never hers to carry. "I'm scared," Vivian admitted. "I'm scared no one will believe me. I'm scared it will tear apart the only family I've ever had. I'm scared Michael will choose his father over me." "Those fears are completely understandable," Jennifer assured her. "But consider this. By staying silent, you're allowing Frank to continue having access to you and potentially to other vulnerable people. You're also depriving yourself of the support and justice you deserve." By the end of the call, Vivian hadn't made any firm decisions about reporting, but she had something she hadn't had in weeks. Hope. Hope that she wasn't crazy, that what happened to her was real and serious and not her fault. Hope that there were people who would believe her and support her. Hope that she could reclaim her life from the shadow Frank had cast over it. The next day, she called in sick to work and made an appointment with a therapist who specialized in sexual assault trauma. It was the first step in a long journey, but it was a step forward instead of the endless spiral downward she had been trapped in. And 3 days later, on her first wedding anniversary, sitting across from Michael at their favorite restaurant as he toasted their future together, Vivian made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. She was going to tell him the truth. She was going to trust in their love and hope that it was strong enough to survive the storm that was coming. Before we continue with Vivian's story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The conversation with Michael happened the morning after their anniversary dinner. Vivian had barely slept, rehearsing the words in her mind, trying to find a way to shatter her husband's world as gently as possible. They were sitting in their kitchen, the same kitchen where Frank had made his threatening visits, sharing coffee and leftover anniversary cake. "Michael," Vivian said, her voice shaking despite her resolve, "I need to tell you something. Something terrible. And I need you to listen to all of it before you say anything." The look of concern that crossed Michael's face nearly broke her resolve. He reached for her hand, but she pulled back. She couldn't bear to be touched, even by him, while she told this story. What followed was one of the most difficult conversations of both their lives. Vivian told Michael everything about his father's escalating behavior, about the night of the assault, about the weeks of silence and threats. She watched her husband's face cycle through disbelief, confusion, anger, and devastation as the truth sank in. "No," Michael said when she finished, his voice hollow. "No, that's not. My father wouldn't. He's not that kind of man." "I know how hard this is to believe," Vivian said, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't want to believe it either. I didn't want to tell you because I knew it would hurt you. But Michael, I can't carry this secret anymore. It's killing me." Michael stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. There has to be some misunderstanding. Maybe he was drinking. Maybe he... No, that doesn't excuse it. Nothing excuses it. He stopped pacing and looked at his wife, really looked at her for the first time in weeks. "God, Vivian, what have you been going through? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I was terrified you wouldn't believe me. Because I was terrified of what it would do to your family. Because Frank threatened me, made me think it was my fault somehow." The anger that flashed in Michael's eyes was unlike anything Vivian had ever seen from her gentle husband. "He threatened you? After what he did to you, he threatened you?" "He said it would destroy the family if anyone found out. He said it would hurt you and your mother and Carlos. He made me feel like protecting all of you was more important than protecting myself." Michael knelt beside Vivian's chair, taking her hands despite her initial resistance. "Listen to me," he said fiercely. Nothing is more important than you. Not my father, not my family, not anyone. You are my wife and I should have protected you. I should have seen what was happening." "You couldn't have known," Vivian whispered. "But I should have noticed that you were in pain. I should have pushed harder when I knew something was wrong." Michael's voice broke. "I failed you, and I'm so sorry." The decision to go to the police wasn't easy, but it was unanimous. Michael drove Vivian to the station that afternoon, holding her hand as she gave her statement to Detective Lisa Rodriguez. No relation to Michael's family despite the shared surname. Detective Rodriguez was a veteran of the Special Victims Unit, with over 15 years of experience handling sexual assault cases involving family members. "These cases are always complicated," Detective Rodriguez explained as Vivian finished her statement. "Family dynamics make victims reluctant to come forward, and perpetrators often use those relationships to manipulate and silence their victims. But I want you to know that we take these allegations very seriously." The investigation that followed was thorough and professional. Detective Rodriguez began by examining Vivian's phone, documenting the escalating pattern of Frank's text messages. The messages painted a clear picture of grooming behavior: the excessive concern for her welfare, the comments about her appearance, the attempts to isolate her and create opportunities for contact. The detective also interviewed Michael, not as a suspect but as a witness to his father's behavior toward Vivian. "I keep thinking back to family gatherings," Michael told the detective, his voice heavy with guilt. "The way he looked at her, the way he always found excuses to touch her. I thought he was just being fatherly, but now I see it differently." Sarah Chen, the nurse who had first encouraged Vivian to seek help, provided a witness statement about Vivian's dramatic behavioral changes following the assault. "I've been a nurse for 12 years, Sarah told Detective Rodriguez. "I know what trauma looks like, and Vivian exhibited classic symptoms of sexual assault trauma: the weight loss, the hypervigilance, the inability to concentrate, the way she would flinch when men approached her." The detective also spoke with Dr. Martinez, who confirmed the changes in Vivian's work performance and demeanour. "She went from being one of our most engaged, confident nurses to someone who seemed to be barely holding herself together," he stated. The transformation was dramatic and concerning. Perhaps the most crucial piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Carlos, Michael's younger brother, approached Detective Rodriguez 3 days after learning about the investigation. His testimony would prove to be devastating for Frank's defense. "I never said anything because I thought I was imagining it," Carlos told the detective, his hands shaking as he spoke. "But my dad, he's always been weird about women. Not just Vivian, but other women too. My ex-girlfriend told me he made her uncomfortable, but I thought she was just being dramatic." Carlos revealed that Frank had a history of inappropriate behaviour toward young women in their social circle. Comments about their appearance, unwanted touching disguised as fatherly affection, and a pattern of seeking out opportunities to be alone with vulnerable women. "He has this way of targeting women who don't have strong family support," Carlos said. "Women who are grateful for his attention because they don't have anywhere else to turn." The detective also discovered that Frank had been researching Vivian's work schedule through the hospital's online staff directory, explaining how he knew exactly when she would be alone. Security footage from a gas station near Vivian and Michael's house showed Frank's truck parked there on multiple occasions, apparently watching their home to learn their routines. But perhaps the most damning evidence came from Frank himself. When Detective Rodriguez and her partner arrived to question him, Frank's first response wasn't denial. It was anger at Vivian for betraying the family. His statements to police revealed a man who felt entitled to Vivian's body and saw her resistance as ingratitude for everything he had done for her. "I gave her everything," Frank told the detectives, apparently unaware that his words were being recorded. "I walked her down the aisle when she had nobody. I treated her like my own daughter. And this is how she repays me? By trying to destroy my family?" When pressed about the specific allegations, Frank's story kept changing. First, he claimed he had never been in their house that night. Then, when confronted with evidence that contradicted this, he claimed he had stopped by to check on her, but had never entered her bedroom. Finally, he admitted to being in her bedroom, but claimed everything that happened was consensual. "She wanted it," Frank insisted. a claim that made Detective Rodriguez's job easier rather than harder. "She's been flirting with me for months. She knew what she was doing." These statements not only contradicted Frank's initial denials, but also revealed the predatory mindset that had driven his behavior. Detective Rodriguez had seen it before. Perpetrators who convinced themselves that their victims had somehow asked for or deserved their assault. The investigation took 6 weeks to complete, during which time Vivian continued therapy and tried to rebuild her sense of safety and self-worth. Michael stood by her throughout, attending counselling sessions with her and learning about trauma and its effects on survivors. The process was painful for both of them, but it also strengthened their marriage in ways neither had expected. "I realised that supporting Vivian meant more than just believing her," Michael later reflected. "It meant learning about trauma, understanding triggers, and being patient with her healing process. It meant accepting that some things would never go back to the way they were before, and that was okay." Maria's reaction to learning about her husband's crimes was perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of the entire situation. When Detective Rodriguez informed her of the charges against Frank, Maria's initial response was complete disbelief. "Not my Frank," she kept repeating. "He would never hurt Vivian. He loves her like a daughter." But as the evidence mounted, as she learned about the pattern of behavior and the manipulation, Maria's disbelief turned to horror and then to fierce protectiveness of Vivian. "I should have seen it," she told Vivian through tears when they finally spoke. "I should have protected you. You're my daughter too, and I failed you." The trial of Frank Rodriguez began on a crisp October morning in 2024, nearly 5 months after Vivian first found the courage to speak her truth. The courthouse steps were a gauntlet of emotions for everyone involved. Vivian walked up them flanked by Michael and her victim advocate, while across the plaza, Frank's remaining supporters, mostly business associates who still couldn't believe the charges, gathered in smaller, more subdued groups.